The Waking Tree by C. Don McCallum. Chapter 16. In the Craw. The sun faded from the room, but the television shot out its rays. It's last night all over again. A rerun of the Motherless Home episode. Josephine found it hard to move to the rhythm that pulsed her blood in the darkness of the living room on this night, illuminated only by the throbbing box plugged in at the wall. Her father had taken them earlier that night, after their supper at the charbroiled hamburger place, to walk in a field of power lines that stretched out in a chain. The massive towers held hands and hummed across an unseen distance. Josephine envisioned all of them lumbering in a poor imitation of trees all across the nation. Maybe they even extended down into South America to the tip of the Western world, stopping only for water. Or maybe their hands reached under the water, under volcanic streams of the Earth's hot, angry, hidden spaces. Wherever they went, they threw out their energy into the sky and into houses, causing light to mimic the sun, televisions to copy the stories that one could find flashing in human minds through mouths and on paper. There was music, too, that could rise from the lungs of mothers and fathers, and that could fall from the tongues of children. People had done their very best to recreate the natural world they want to make. Now Jared and Darnell sat watching a flickering box of light and sound. Josephine watched their lack of reactions to the story before them out of the corner of her eye. They were as dead as the coins begging for freedom under her pillow down the hall, but their silence was just as loud. No songs could they sing under the mesmerizing light, only more mimicry and recollections of memories that were not their own. Josephine looked down at the carpet and stroked Rachel's hair. A hollow place was growing round and deep in Josephine's chest where her breathing should be. The air squeezed around the void in her and struggled to get to all of the necessary places. Standing, she held her doll loosely in her left hand and pulled in a breath and another until her toes, her hair, her eyes could move again in their usual, nearly undetectable thumping habit. As she walked to her father, climbed up in his chair beside him, and rested her head on his side, the room held life for the first time that evening. Even the walls were silent, no longer bickering within Darnell's head so loud that Josephine could hear whispers of the conversation leaking out of his ears. Darnell looked at his sister, at his father. Jared pulled her tight against himself and looked at his own eyes staring at him from the boy's resuscitating face. Josephine patted her father's hand, his reward for not drinking tonight, for taking them to the field. The house was quiet except for its own slow, rhythmic breathing. An elusive type of life dwelled in the machinery contained there. If well maintained, they could run relatively forever until dissolving into the same oblivion as their owners. Later, Jared got up and drug his feet in a sweaty haze toward the thermostat in the hallway. The carpet didn't give as much now as it had done when it was all new. That was a long time ago. He missed its quick cushion and the original smooth softness that used to greet the form-fitting movements of his feet. Abra hadn't vacuumed before she left, so the carpet begged to be pulled and sucked into a closer state of cleanliness. But it was too late and too hot for Jared to do anything about that now. Set at 60, the thermostat revealed the truth of the situation. The air conditioner was broken at last, and during the hottest time of the year, he'd call in the morning, but he knew no one would be able to make it out there for a day or two at least. Back in his bedroom, Jared twisted the window lock and lifted the pane for some air. The light breeze shocked the sweat away for a moment. He started to inhale it when a noise from Darnell's room recoiled him, propelled him towards the crash, but the room's darkness instantly changed his pace from hasty to cautious. Creeping the door open, soundless in his mind, Jared found nothing but his sleeping son, a look of agony flurrying on his face, accompanied by periodic groans and rapid breaths. The sweat on Darnell's face came less from the heat than from his obvious suffering. Jared popped open his son's window and watched the room breathe in the new air like a set of suffocating lungs. The wretched boy's smell was replaced by the breath of trees and other living things that lurked, grew, and emitted life in the night. Just then, a chill struck Jared from behind, twisted his backbone, and set him in motion again. He wondered where Abra was tonight. Down the hall, Jared knew that Josephine must be burning up too. Her door was always open because she didn't like the feeling of being closed in and separated from the rest of the house. So Jared went to her to resuscitate her room. Standing at the newly opened window, he stared at the streetlight's glare on her porcelain skin. The muscles in her body rested serene. No thought, only dreams dwelt in her bed. Her beauty hurt him, made his stomach sickeningly empty. His knees couldn't support this kind of pain. The blood drained away from his head, and he fell at the side of her bed, wishing he had that kind of innocence, mesmerized by this Abra duplicate. Another little mother. He could make things right for her. Breathing steadily, deeply, Josephine rolled on out of her bed, still asleep. She stood and instinctively walked to the bathroom. Jared strained to remain invisible so as not to startle her and cease her silent, elegant creeping. Her scream would add too much chaos to this night. When she was out of sight, he reached out to touch where her small body had rested, her warmth retained in the pink sheets. He rubbed his hand there, caressing the spot where her willowy arms and legs had been, where her impossibly petite torso had spent these last hours in the solace of the night's heat. He tried to console her space, her warmth with his touch. "She'll be back," he told her warmth. Her pillow, hot and wet with her saliva and sweat, held on to one of her long black hairs visible in the brightness of the street light. He picked it up, pulling it tight, too tight, snapping it in two. He raised himself up on her bed and placed his head on her pillow, smelling the sweetness of her lingering scent. He forgot to tell Darnell to give her a bath tonight. She had played hard outside that day. He could tell. The dirt's rich smell had soaked into her skin and hair, creating a picture in his mind. A picture of her lying on the ground, rolling and looking at the trees, the sky, and its creatures sharing her space. A picture of bugs allowed to scramble on her, making a pleasant yet temporary home on her. Jared's fingers crawled on her pillow in imitation of Josephine's insect friends. He wanted to touch her and hold her, his daughter. He wanted her to know how he felt, and for her to know that she was the only one that he would ever love. His only girl. He listened to her move in the distance. Lifting her pillow, he held it close, his eyes forced shut by his love. He smelled the pillow again and let its moist softness, both hot and cool, caress his face. He imagined her hands were touching him, taking away some of the hurt. And then the violent scent of metal shocked open his eyes. He saw them then, the coins. Lying under where her pillow had been was a pile of metal. No, he thought, hundreds of coins randomly placed and shining cold. No, not Josephine. How could she? Jared didn't remember dropping the pillow or how late it was or that Darnell was sleeping in the next room. All he could see was the lie, and from the last person whom he had ever expected. In this narrowing vision of his rage, the realization of her betrayal, Jared hunted in near blindness for her body. He would shake it. He would mark it up with palm prints. He would make her pay. Josephine. Even Josephine was not to be trusted. Did she know that whatever goodness he contained was for her? "Why?" he yelled, holding her arms tight, lifting her to look her into her eyes. Josephine was silent, not understanding, barely awake. He shook her, rattling her head back and forth in an eruptive yes. Why? His breath was hot and putrid in her face. Her trembling body restrained any tears, though they wanted to come. Why, what? She whispered. She knew he'd found the coins. What else could make him act this way to her? But would he believe his own mother, dead so long, had brought them to her in a glow of light? He carried her, her skin pulled in pink, and threw her tiny body on her bed. The cold, smelly coins shocked her hot face. A few of the coins mingled with her sweat and stuck to her skin, only to drop when he jerked her erect again. Why, Josephine? The tears, in truth, broke through her quaking body. They told me to, she whispered. Jared picked up the coins in his hard hands. They told you to. This was not his daughter. This was Abra. He grabbed a handle of coins. The metal hit and stung her teeth as he shoved the coins into her mouth. They weren't yours to take, Josephine. She coughed and spat and cried, but the coins kept coming in and near her throat. Grandma, Josephine tried to mumble through the wet, dirty metal. What? Jared asked. Josephine's head jerked back. She swallowed some of the tinier coins and choked. Air, she needed air. She coughed and gagged and struggled. The coins had to turn her loose. Grandma, she called in her mind. On his knees, Jared picked her up and threw her from the bed. I'm here, Josephine, Bernadine whispered where only she could hear, even over her own retching. Air entered her lungs again. She would live now. She could feel it. Jared pulled his knees out from under himself where he was on the bed and slid forward to Josephine. He saw her shadowy figure against the wall tremble and fall limp. She wasn't even crying. He would stop that. He'd make her cry. He dropped to the floor and crawled over to her. Gently, he lifted her hair, smelled it, let her go. Her hands rested on either side of her face. She almost seemed to be asleep again. He caressed the roundness of the back of her head. It fit perfectly into his palm. He picked up as much of her hair as he could and stood crouching over her. Pulling her hair up slowly, painfully, he whispered through his teeth and tears, Why, Josephine? Why did you lie to me? He let her head drop hard on the floor, though she didn't produce even a whimper. Josephine, Bernadine cooed, I want you to go somewhere with me. Okay, she mumbled into the filth of the carpet. Okay, Jared screamed. What's that supposed to mean?
Okay.
Jared pulled her head up again, by her hair again, this time lifting with such force that her torso followed, her arms hung down, her back arched and contorted. Still, she didn't cry. She didn't confess or offer any explanation. He straddled her and pulled her head back tighter. He wanted her to shake and make her cry and make her say she was sorry. He wanted her to beg for forgiveness in his well-practiced, pain-producing hands, beg for him to stop. Why? He demanded in a searing, shattering yell. She did not answer. He kicked at her dangling arms. Why? Josephine could only hear him off in the distance now. She stood holding her grandma's hand while she watched her father pick up his feet and press his weight down on her lowered arms. He let her head fall on the ground with what should have been a deep, painful thud. I want to show you something, Josephine. Bernadine's voice was so full of patience, of love. Josephine took one more look at her father, walking slowly now up and down her tendril arms and hands, pressing her. She turned away. All sound was lost on her, except for her grandma's voice. She had no pain, not even any concept of it. There were only creamy waves of contentment enfolding her as her grandma lifted her away from the suffering body, from her room and into her own never-ending being. Swirling in color and light, Josephine found a sense of solace like she had never known. She was air, solid and liquid, flowing, moving, changing every instant until she hit a surface which she didn't understand. The smell of aged chemicals, searching for its own decay, shoved her through the hollowed grooves. Then she felt it in her belly, in the coins in her belly. They were crying. "Get me out," they said. "I want out." Josephine's spirit sprawled out in the chest of drawers where the limbs of a little boy had been stored so many years ago, then disposed of in a field behind a sick old man's house. A flood of blood, lust, and misery knocked her out of her grandma's hold and out of the wood grain of the drawer where Bernadine had taken her. In that instant, all of the pain of her father's skin twisting, love crushing feet were stomping down on her again. She cried out, "Christopher!" Jared dropped her, freed her from his presence. She barely heard him leave, gone into his car and into the night. The air said, "Sometimes I grow weary from this world. I flitter and I float, searching for a gentle place to rest, till the next breeze, till the next waft of air, sent by the rays of the sun." Thank you for listening to The Waking Tree by C. Don McCallum. If you're enjoying this story, please consider sharing it with someone you know. And please like the video and subscribe to this channel to help others discover these stories.